Welcome to the Coaching Revealed podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Matzel. In today's episode, Institute of Coaching founder Carol Kauffman sits down to talk with Robert Biswas-Diener, a renowned researcher, psychologist, and the newest program director for the Institute's annual conference. Coming up in just a few months on May 1st and 2nd at the Renaissance Boston Waterfront Hotel is the IOC's Leadership and Healthcare Conference. This year's theme is Working at the Inflection Point, and Carol and Robert discuss how they brought together thought leaders and practitioners from around the world, including Google, Moderna, Harvard Business School, and Harvard Medical School, including topics such as artificial intelligence, human-centered leadership, well-being, and the craft of coaching. To close out, Robert and Carol discuss how the field of coaching has evolved since the IOC's first annual conference over 16 years ago. If you are interested in attending the Institute's conference in Boston, you can learn more and register by going to instituteofcoaching.org. And now, our conversation with Robert and Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Kauffman, founder of the Institute of Coaching, with Robert Biswas-Diener, co-director of the conference we're doing, Coaching in Leadership and Healthcare. So I really am looking forward to this conference, Robert, and I'm incredibly happy we've done it together because you're actually fun.
Oh. I was thinking about that because I was a little surprised to see that this is the 16th one of these. And, I'm guessing that means you've been through 16 iterations of this. I'm curious how you see these conferences as having sort of evolved over time.
Well, I think the field has evolved so much over this time. Like literally, when we began the Institute, there was an anti-science feeling. And so we were sort of swimming against the tide. And now, for example, ICF has donated, I forget how much, $600,000 or some big amount to the Institute to do research. And they've just come a very, very long way. So I think I'm more struck by the evolving field of coaching.
And I think you've done a good job of not just hewing closely to, it's just got to be coaches talking about coaching. And one person who's coming, who you turned me on to, is Colin Fisher.
He was primarily a musician, and then he learned a lot about how teams function from his work in music. So yeah, I like him. He's got really good energy.
I love that. And that's actually, when you asked me, do you want to put this conference on with me in my heart? I thought, absolutely not, because I know it would be a huge amount of work. And yet, it, of course, is fun to work with you, but the idea that I would have some influence in putting together a conference that I myself would want to attend, just like you're like, oh, I really love Colin's work. It would be great to bring him on board, get him in the mix. I also feel that way. Like I really wanted to reach out to people who I myself want to learn from or try and introduce topics that I think are important topics. So it's kind of a privileged position to be able to do that.
Well, it is interesting because you just reminded me that was what Margaret Moore and I did when we did the very first conference, which I think was in 2008. But what we did is we sat down and what's the conference we would want to go to? And that was sort of like the through line of not what is the right thing to do or what would people want to hear. Because we figure, it's sort of like in writing, where it's like in somebody's specific story the more specific you are, the more universal it is. So I thought if we really want to learn all these things, chances are others do as well.
Yeah, I like it.
But I'm going to do a story/brag. When we first wanted to do this conference, Harvard didn't want to do it. And the big thing was they said, we don't want to do it. No one will come. So we got it approved content-wise, but they still didn't want to do it because they're like, nobody will come. I mean, they can't afford to lose $60,000. And so what happened is they were really waffling. And then, so Margaret and I said, we'll write the check. So we ponied up $60,000. It was in a bank that if it was needed, we had. And so then they're like, okay. And then it turned out to be the most sold out conference in Harvard Medical School history. They hired, I kid you not, bouncers. And then people made the incredibly political, horrifying errors of telling people who were C-level leaders at Partners that they couldn't come. It was sold out. And we're like, no. Go find them, bring them in. But that's how it began. So when you were saying how has it evolved, I totally forgot that people thought nobody wants a conference for coaches, especially as part of the Harvard continuing education.
That's incredible, Carol. Well, kudos to you for taking the risk and putting your own money on the line, and to Meg as well. It's extraordinary. I think for people who are newer to the profession, it's kind of hard to emphasize what it was like even 20, 25 years ago in coaching, and how much more established it is, how much firmer the science it is. And I really look at the Institute of Coaching as sort of the flag bearer of all of that. That's like, to me, the embodiment of all of the best of the most responsible aspects of coaching.
So you don't know how the Institute of Coaching got started. And that is, it's Margaret Moore's fault. She and I went up to International Coach Federation, where I was giving a keynote in Quebec in 2004. And then we got to know each other and started doing some work. At that same meeting is when I met this woman, Ruth Ann Harnish, who was my coach for a while. And she was the one who eventually gave us the $2 million to create the Institute of Coaching. But before then, so Margaret and I met at the conference. Then we did some work together. And then one day she approached me and said, this is like 2006. And she's like, Carol, coaching needs an academic home and you should provide it. And I said, no. Then 6 months later, she asked me again and I said, no. And then the third time she approached me 6 months later and I said, okay, fine. But I'm not going to create the institute you want. I'm going to create the institute I want. I'm being a little harsh. It's not exactly. It's more or less exactly. And what that was is I wasn't interested in a wellness health coaching institute. I was interested more in a positive psychology. So we created something that was the Coaching and Positive Psychology Initiative. And that was when also we were both getting more interested in leadership. But that's how that started. And then a couple of years later, the conference.
You know, to underscore that to anyone listening to this, it seems recent, right? Oh, 2005, 2006. But as recently as then, there were people looking at positive psychology and saying, oh, it's a waste of time. You could never measure happiness. Happiness is foolish. Who cares about well-being? People were very dismissive of well-being programming at work. And that's not that long ago. So for you to set up this institute, I really think is extraordinary given the headwinds.
Oh, yeah. One of the most embarrassing moments for McLean Hospital was when Todd Cashton applied to be one of our interns, and he was turned down. And he was turned down because of his interest in positive psychology. And I clearly did not have the correct amount of influencing power. But to this day, I regret that we didn't get to capture Todd. He would probably be like the head of the institute now as well as the head of it.
Yeah. And for those who might not know his work, first of all, he won the American Psychological Association's Early Career Award, which is the highest award for an early career researcher. And currently his citation count and his research productivity are off the charts. There's no one in our generation just about that's as productive as he is. So
yeah, but positive psychology was not mainstream, and it was really seen as the smelly newcomers. Like, ugh.
Oh yeah, I was getting that personally all the time. People, were saying to my face, "Oh, you're wasting your time," or "That's a fool's errand," which of course is quite a rude thing to say. They were also saying about coaching, right? Like, "Oh, this is a multi-level marketing scheme," or "This doesn't work," or "This is only for the privileged." I mean, those kinds of critiques. And it's so reassuring just to see how far it's come since those early days.
And also, one of our first speakers. So we have a Vision of Excellence Award that we also give at the conference. And this year, we're actually giving it to Magda Mook. And she's the CEO of the ICF. And her work is really pioneering and groundbreaking. Back then, the first, at that ICF event in 2004, Tony Grant presented, and he is no longer with us. But he really was sort of the father of coaching psychology. And that's the other thing, that back then, coaching as a theoretical discipline and field didn't really exist. And one thing we're happy about is the role that the Institute had in helping that happen. Because, so Margaret doesn't have a PhD, but she actually knows more about research than I do. And she reads everything and she actually remembers it, as opposed to me, where I read it and it's this lovely cloud that I sort of kind of remember, where she can go like this. And then Susan David was our head of the research for a long time. And she, if you guys know her, she's freaking brilliant. But back then, it was all these brilliant people without a home. And so Margaret was a little bit right in muscling me into creating an academic home for coaching.
Yeah, I can actually remember the very first time I ever met Margaret was in Washington, D.C., and we were sitting on these kind of tall stools together. And she very much was talking about sort of not how lonely coaching was, but that lack of home, that this real thirst for wanting to establish something within coaching. So from the get-go, that's what she was thinking about and talking about, from the very first time.
Yeah. And our grants have come a long way in terms of, before you were asking, how has the conference evolved? The biggest change is we also now have this scientific poster sessions and people who win the posters. And that would be unheard of. When we began, people would practically be writing in crayon. I mean, it's just the whole idea that coaching and research could coexist was just, you must be crazy, Then, of course, Tony came along and just did paper after paper after paper showing the effectiveness of coaching. And then Michael Kavanaugh and that whole group, also they just started putting out these papers, getting big research grants, and showing that, coaching actually works was the first big wave. But then much more on why it works. The questions are getting a lot more nuanced.
Yeah, absolutely. And now it's ensconced in many different business schools. You've got people like Eric DeHaan or Stephen Palmer, Martin Galpin. I mean, just so many researchers out there. And there is an emerging but robust body of literature. And as someone who is scientifically aligned, I think that's good for coaching, because I think science is a good way of knowing, because it's replicable and generalizable, and all of the virtues of science. So anytime I hear people say coaching, is a little bit like the Wild West and it's unregulated, I understand the critique, but I think science is one of the ways to remedy that.
Well, that was Ruth Ann Harnish's vision before anybody else. The woman is a number of things, but she has always been a futurist. And so in 2001, 2002, her vision was, if coaching is going to make it, it needs to have a theoretical and scientific foundation. And nobody was thinking that. I wasn't thinking that. Nobody was thinking that. And then she created the Foundation for Coaching, which was the precursor of the Institute. So, but also very interesting, a non-academic. She was a journalist. She was Oprah Winfrey's boss, by the way, in Nashville years and years ago. And, just having this vision of, coaching needed an academic foundation. I mean, who would have thought of it? Well, fortunately, she thought of it. And then thankfully, she infected Margaret, who then infected me to do this. The other thing, though, is people hear about my career and they think I'm just awesome. But actually, everything that I've done, I've been forced into doing. So the Institute of Coaching, okay, that wasn't my idea. I said no. Now, coaching has a dedicated academic journal called Coaching, an International Journal of Theory, Research, and Practice, which I was the founding editor with Tatiana Bakarova. And the way that happened was I was in London, and Stephen Palmer, who you just mentioned, which is what made me think of this, approached me and said, Carol, I want you to start an academic journal in coaching. And I'm like, literally, I said to him, I remember exactly where we were sitting at the time. I said, okay, Stephen, you want me to be the founding editor-in-chief of an academic journal? He goes, yes. I'm like, are you out of your mind? I said, doesn't it bother you that I haven't edited anything in my life other than one special issue, which was mostly done by Alex Lindley, and you want me to start a journal? And he's like, that's right, you're the person to do it. And that's when I said, okay, fine, but you have to get me to work with somebody who actually knows what they're doing. And that's how we found Tatiana and started that journal, which is, it's now, again, the same thing. The quality of papers that are submitted to that journal and accepted are really great. And they are a part of that scientific foundation now that coaching has.
Yeah. Carol, this is so funny. I don't know if I've known you for 25, 26 years. I mean, we've known each other a long time.
Since the Gallup organization days. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm on that editorial board of that journal. Yeah. And I never knew that. I never knew you were the founding editor. I mean, I'm learning so much from you in this conversation. It's amazing.
But yeah, it was Stephen Palmer just, made me do it.
That's great. Any developments for the Institute that personally I should know about, that everyone should know about beyond just this great conference coming up?
One of the things, so I've stepped back from the Institute. I'm now sort of board level, and then I come in for the conference and then come out. And then my interest is getting more people to become professional fellows, because I think it's good for them and good for us. But what I'm really impressed by, so I stopped being like super in the middle of the Institute in around 2021, which was really always my goal, is that if the Institute was going to be successful, I couldn't be involved with it at some point, because it can't be the Carol Kauffman show. It needed to be not have me involved, because I wanted to exist in 2050. And actually, now that further into McLean and this Parthenon management group that runs us now is the reason we might exist in 2050, that we couldn't do as an offshoot institute of our own. But what I found is the development is there's so many offerings every week. The Institute, like we didn't start out like that. I think with COVID, we had like something called a huddle, which we just started in one day. Because everyone should get together. And I thought Marshall Goldsmith was doing that, so we should do it too. And there's just a lot of offerings, a sort of never-ending series of podcasts and webinars and all kinds of things that the Institute is doing, that now as an observer and a receiver, it just sort of blows me away that, it's been good. Jeff Hull has been a fantastic executive director for the past few years. And now he is going to help us find the next person. So, hey, out there. You're an executive director of a nonprofit. You're interested in connecting with us. Write me, Carol at carolkauffman.com, 2 F's, 1 N, and I'll connect you with who you can talk to, because we're going to start the search for an executive director.
Wow. I love it. I love that you're recruiting right here in the middle of this conversation. You don't find that every day. And I would also underscore your point that about being a fellow of the Institute, all the educational offerings, access to research, the access to the wider community, really amazing.
And also, when you're a fellow, you then can also be among the people that give these offerings, who can, there's a process where you can be giving some of the webinars or being on the podcasts and stuff like that, because we really are looking for the next generation. Also, if you're out there and you're on the younger side, get in touch with us. We really want to know who the next generation of coaching leaders are. And for those of us who are like north of 50, we don't know you, and we want to know you, and we need to know you. So reach out if you're like, even slightly academically inclined and you're interested in coaching. Reach out to us, join us. We're looking for the next generation of coaches and coaching researchers.
And that's what's going to make things still be around in 2050.
So on that note, I'd say we had fun and now we're done. How about you?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, so whoever is visiting with us right now, we're glad that you're joining us. We hope to see you at the conference. And if by the time you see this, the conference is long gone, come to our next conference.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Coaching Revealed. You can join Carol, Robert, and a host of other thought leaders in Boston on May 1st and 2nd at the 16th Annual Coaching in Leadership and Healthcare Conference. Visit the Institute of Coaching at instituteofcoaching.org for more information and registration.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Coaching Revealed, brought to you by the Institute of Coaching. You can learn more about the Institute on our website at instituteofcoaching.org. You can stay up to date with new episodes of our podcast by liking and following Coaching Revealed. You can also find us on social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X with the handle Institute of Coaching. We also love hearing from our guests, so please reach out to us with thoughts you have on this episode and any questions you have about coaching. Until next time, this is Emily Tarani with Coaching Revealed.